Showtime! The Capital G Show starts right now.
What's up YouTube, Capital G here. So guys, I've been doing a little bit of testing under the September 1st TCG ban list, and I'm going to be doing a ton more once DN updates and they make the list official on there. But what I wanted to say is the preconceived notion that I had that, you know, if Storm is not legalized, then we automatically have a set 5 format. Oh my goodness, I 100% positively, absolutely could not have been more wrong. I have tested and I have learned quickly and abruptly this is not true. You know, the first thing that came to my mind is, you know, what were things like the last time we didn't have Heavy Storm? And I remember, you know, I was playing Gladby's top regionals. You know, the top decks back then were like TG Stun, they had won nationals. You know, Gravekeepers were like a very high tier 1 deck. And I was like, well, back row pretty much was running shit back then. You know, even people were playing, you know, cards like Forbidden Lance everywhere. People were even playing 7 Tools of the Bandit because, you know, traps were so prevalent. And I thought, all right, well, it should be similar to that because there's no Heavy Storm. And it just isn't. You know, the thing that I didn't realize is why Spell and Trap Destruction lost their most potent card in Heavy Storm. You know, back row decks lost their most potent protection card in Solemn Judgment. So, I mean, those two things right there create an automatic balance. You know, you lose the most powerful Spell and Trap card, you lose the most powerful Destruction card. I mean, Spell and Trap removal and Spell and Trap, you know, set 5 decks should be pretty much on an even playing field, but it's not. And that's because these set 5 decks, they also lost 2 copies of Compulse. They also lost a D-Prison. And now, I mean, you're down to a single copy of both Bottomless and Torrential Tribute. So if you're like me and you're playing these back row decks and you're trying to fill the void with other good traps, I mean, you're probably highly dissatisfied with the results about now. I mean, I've been looking at Sakaretsu Armor and Trap Hole, and I'm like, well, way too many monsters get around those cards. You know, cards like Prideful Roar, I mean, they're good for what they do, but if you don't have a monster on board, they don't even work. You know, Fiendish Chain is a card that's great, but it doesn't kill the monster, so I'm not even going to get a 1-for-1 out of that. And then you can still synchro with the card, you can still exceed. Hell, if I happen to hit one of your rank 5 or 6 monsters, you can just overlay Gaia Charger on there, and then I'm going to be very, very sad. So to say that the trap pool right now is really shitty is, I just think it's an understatement. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about in this video is 2 cards that I think are going to be huge cards in this format. I mean, they might even become power cards, and I think that they're really going to swing the pendulum into the favor of Spell and Trap removal, and why I don't think that these back row heavy decks are going to become the meta like they did before. The first card I'm going to talk about is Trap Stun. Now, for my money, as a back row player, you know, that's been my MO, that's been my mantra throughout the years. This card has always been a little scarier than Heavy Storm. For starters, if in the past you solemned Heavy Storm, I mean, you had to feel great about that situation. If you had your lock of Skill Drain or Royal Oppression or, you know, whatever cards plus Mirror Forces and, you know, D-Prisons and back row plus, you know, a good monster or whatever on board, and you happened to solemn a Heavy Storm, you felt great. You knew that you had taken out your opponent's biggest threat to your back row, and you didn't have to worry about that card until the next game. The same can't be said for Trap Stun. You know, who the hell runs 1 copy of Trap Stun? Like, that's asinine. Most people run 2 or 3 copies, whether they main deck them or they sideboard them in. So if you happen to solemn a Trap Stun, it's like, okay, well, you had better win within a couple of turns, because chances are your opponent has a couple more copies, and once they get that Trap Stun again, then what are you going to do? I mean, you already cut your life points in half, so if you weren't going to get OTK'd the last time, you sure as hell are now. Trap Stun also just seems so much more difficult to prevent than Heavy Storm, you know, whether it being the fact that you can't use Starlight Road on it, you can't use a Stardust Dragon if you have that face up on the field, you can't use anything that stops, you know, destruction effects, whether that be like random fake traps or Judgment of Maneuvers or anything like that. And then, you know, back row heavy decks, they don't run a lot of Spell and Trap removal. And even if you do, Trap Stun's one of those cards where it can be relatively difficult to pick out. You know, let's say you're playing against a deck like Mermill, where in the TCG, you still can't blind MST that deck. I mean, it's like, do you risk, you know, using the MST in hopes of hitting Trap Stun? because if you wait until they activate it, then it's too late. You know, you're just going to get raped by Trap Stun. But if you happen to risk the MST and you hit one of their back row and it's a Bit Spear, then it's like, well, obviously you're just going to get boned that way, because now your opponent's going to go plus for days. And if you look at decks like Windups or possibly Infernity, decks that play, you know, pretty decent size amount of traps, it's the same situation. You know what I mean? If you're trying to blind MST your opponent, you know, hitting their Infernity Break or maybe their Deep Prison Fiendish Chain, that's really not going to help. But your opponent can just sit on that Trap Stun until they have all their pieces, flip it over, then it's like pretty much good night. Now, I know a lot of people out there are probably thinking, well, I'll just use Dark Bribe on a card like Trap Stun, but to me, that just screams out absolute desperation, because, I mean, you're basically announcing, oh, Lord, please don't use this Trap Stun. I'd rather give you free cards than have you resolve this card. And it's like, well, we already established that I'm probably playing more than one Trap Stun. You just went neg 1 and you put me one card closer to getting my other copies. So if that Dark Bribe was all you had to stop my Trap Stun before, I know that as soon as I get another copy, I'm probably going to win. Now, the second card that I want to talk about is Black Rose Dragon, and it's a card, full disclosure, that I like semi-forgot even existed, because, I mean, hell, like, how many formats has it been since this card was actually relevant? But I can tell you, after doing a little bit of testing, this card is actually really legit right now. You look at past formats when Solemn Warning was at 2, or remember, like, right after Dual Ref came out and the card was at 3, Black Rose Dragon had absolutely no hope of being, like, of having the smallest role of importance in those formats, because good luck getting through 2 to 3 warnings, a Solemn Judgment, and 1 to 2 Starlights. Like, yeah, right, you weren't getting through all of that shit. You were just going to waste a whole bunch of resources and then have your opponent say, nope, I'm going to activate this one card and completely change the scope of the duel, and now you lose. Now that the trap pool is just god-awful, Black Rose Dragon is actually amazing, because there's, like, nothing to stop him. You know, Warning is limited, you know, Bottomless, Compose, Mirror Force, Deep Prison, all of these traps that people are still going to be running, yet they don't do jack shit against this card. You know, and with MST at 3, it's like, okay, you can have your Fiendish Chain, you can have your Skill Drain. If I'm a smart player, do you really think that's going to stop my Black Rose? No, I'm just going to hold. I'm going to summon my Black Rose. I'm going to wait for you to try and be slick and Fiendish Chain or Skill Drain it. Then I'm going to chain, and then you're going to be salty. And I'm not going to go ahead and blind MST any of your garbage cards. I'm just going to let Black Rose wipe those things away. And if you're a really savvy player and you happen to use things like Book of Moon or Enemy Controller, you can still get through those Fiendish Chains or Skill Drains too. Hell, you can even get through a Fet Veiler, which is absolutely the last line of defense. So with there being less protection for our spells and traps right now, and Synchro decks kind of on the rise, because, you know, Mermills can make 7s, the Plant Dragon Ruler deck can make 7s, you know, people might even start playing Karakuri, that deck can easily make 7s. Black Rose Dragon is pretty damn good right now, and I think it's going to be a rude awakening for players who think, okay, there's no Heavy Storm, you know, I'm just going to load up on my back rows and I'm not going to be punished. You know, these players are going to be getting absolutely wrecked when somebody's like, you know, okay, summon Black Rose, wipe your entire field, you know, Thunder King Raioh's at 1, so good luck with that. You know, activate Trap Stun, basically blow you out the water with my Zemayo that I can easily make in a deck like Windup. So it's going to be interesting to see how things pan out. But yeah, I made a major misconception, and I just wanted to go ahead and make a video about that. Thank you guys, as always, for watching, and take care.